part. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Alice with Creative Startups, and it's been a couple weeks, so I'm glad to be back with everybody here. Let's see, what do I have to tell you guys about? We have a ton going on at Creative Startups, so I don't want to forget to start off by saying there are like 5 days left, 4 days to sign up for Capital for Creators. There are only a few spots left. This is a brand new, I hate to say it, but groundbreaking course. We are on a mission to equip creatives and creators as business owners and people who can raise money for their business. So check it out. We also have a great Substack. We're on YouTube, etc. But the reason we're here today is because a year or so ago during COVID, I met Robbie Nock, and you and I just hit it off immediately. We have a friend in common in Lena Romfeld, and we early on in the pandemic, right, started doing some work with different entrepreneurs, etc. Here we are a year and a half later, and you and I, Robbie, we've continued this conversation around influence to impact. Before we jump in, I want to read your, frankly, pretty impressive bio. So everybody sit down. It's really long. No, I'm just joking. We were joking about having to cut our bios when we get introduced before we hopped on with you guys. Robbie Nock is an entrepreneur and an educator. He is dedicated to creative innovation and mission-driven organizations. Robbie is the Director of Entrepreneurship at ArtCenter, and he's a faculty with Creative Startups. He serves on the executive committee for the Caltech Entrepreneurs Forum. He is on the board of directors for Innovate Pasadena, great group, and he serves as co-chair for the Creative Advisory Board for the Mayor of Los Angeles. Robbie, when I've heard you describe your life's work, you talk passionately about connecting art, design, business, technology, and your love of working with creative founders. Say a little bit more before we launch in about, for example, LA Optimized, which I think is a project that brings all of that together for you.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me this morning, and a real pleasure to be here and to share some of our work together and this rapidly evolving space. Mm-hmm. And I guess LA Optimized really shows the need for connecting businesses to new and evolving ways to reach their customers and their communities. Mm-hmm. And the goal of that effort is to help small businesses across the city of Los Angeles to adopt new tools to shift towards online operations, and then to be able to continue to reach their communities and customers through content and through marketing across the influencer spectrum. So really rethinking their brand, their story, and the way that they share that online and then through their existing communities. And it's very much about helping them thrive in this radically changed world that we live in, particularly brought on by the pandemic, but something that was happening for a long time before that. And
when you first described LA Optimized, to me, being in New Mexico and working in places like Turkey, Jordan, etc., we see a lot of maybe mom and pop beloved restaurants, fashion stores that sell local designers that have really been shut out of the retail market either by COVID or by changing technologies or the behemoth like Amazon. And yet the creator economy, which we're jumping into now, is huge, and it could be a huge lever for these, as you're calling them, legacy or small, businesses or even medium-sized businesses. And people want to shop local. People want to connect, but where do you find them? When all you see on your stream on Instagram is Nike and Amazon and big businesses. So let's jump into it and talk about the creator economy. First, give us a definition of who is and who isn't a creator. How is it different from creative, first of all?
Right. So the creative economy is broadly the production of creative things. So products, architecture, fashion, branding and marketing, entertainment, gaming, the traditional world around art and design and the pathways that professionals have in that space. And the creator economy is really much broader than that. And it is all of the world that is producing content and sharing that content online through platforms like YouTube and Instagram. They typically can be called influencers. There's a lot of overlap in that space, but it is not necessarily that a creator is an artist or designer or trained in any traditional, visual arts or design methodologies. And that means that it's a far larger and a far more distributed community of people. And what we see from the creative economy and from helping artists and designers start and build and sustain businesses is a lot of the same challenges that creators are confronting as they become, as they grow their audiences and they have more and more influence. And within that, I strongly believe that the content that is created is very much part of the same path, the same motivation that artists and designers are sort of tapping into in their work. So.
Well, and you're right. It's like there's this sort of nut that is the creative product and services. So it could be a theatrical piece, it could be sneakers, but it was a creative thing. And then around that, there's this emerging enormous, the creator economy. You mentioned before we hopped on, $10 billion was spent on creators promoting products, services, et cetera. So they're promoting and bringing into the market these creative products and services. So they kind of go hand in hand. It's sort of an infinity loop, if you will. Why do you think the creator economy has garnered so much attention, investment? A recent Forbes article or CNB, I can't remember. We'll put it in the comments, but a recent article posted that creators have raised $1.3 billion just this calendar year. It's insane. It's on fire. Why is that happening when creatives still struggle a fair amount to get into that more mainstream growth economy?
Well, I think the fundamental shift has been in the direct communication and access to customers and audience members. I think that the major efforts on behalf of big businesses, on behalf of legacy brands, is to be directly communicating to its customer base. And creators have actually developed a much more nuanced, much more personal relationship with those same customers that the legacy brands and businesses are trying to reach. And they're doing so not through selling product just for the sake of it, but through passion and care and commitment to what it is that they represent and why, and their individual values, which also touches on social and political changes that we're undergoing, in a massive way as well. So it's kind of the perfect storm in which technology and behavior has shifted and then kind of reformulated with this new relationship between creators and consumers.
Okay, but I'm going to push back a little bit because, as you know, I like to make fun of the influencers who are showing us how to do our mascara, which I could probably use a little bit of advice along those lines. But I kind of worry, are we marketing and talking about just a bunch of junk? And sometimes what's odd is how it feels so superfluous, and yet Gen Z is, I call them the responsible generation. They're very worried about and focused on important climate change, human rights, gender equity. They're hyper aware. They're worrying about and working on these issues. Why is it that influencers with all of this money, et cetera, have not moved closer to impact? Or am I missing something?
Well, I think we're starting to see that shift, but the access to telling stories about products and services that don't yet exist, and still needing to be able to pay the bills through traditional branded content deals means that the companies that are willing to pay influencers in order to put out that content, to produce and create that content that might be branded or that might place that mascara in a tutorial, there aren't enough forces changing that dynamic. And I think what we're going to see is that influencers, as they continue to grow their communities and audiences, are going to want to push those legacy businesses to change themselves, because fast fashion, any kind of
example, actually.
Sort of trash oriented products and services, those are going to be pushed out, because that's not what the audiences want. That's not the world they want to live in. And but it is still the case that this new economy is reliant on these existing brands and products and services. So we want to see that change.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. We need new companies that have a different fundamental set of values, so that what they're selling is sold, or promoted by creators, but it's a fundamentally different product. It's sustainable. It's made in equitable ways. It, makes sure that wealth moves across a community, doesn't just stay at one household, et cetera. One of the things that you and I like to talk about is the decentralization. And I think that's an important concept around this, because there's both an exciting opportunity here, but we're still not really ensuring that decentralization takes hold. And it's similar to what we were just saying, right? I mean, we still have very specific investors who are investing in the creator economy with ideas around returns, and the seeds for how this next economy is going to grow are being planted maybe in the same ways that the older economy was planted. How can we move toward I think decentralization is really important.
Right. Well, the centralization of resources and the exploitation and extraction of whatever the resource is, that's the sort of history of capitalism. And as the platform economy evolves, we're still seeing a centralization. We're seeing all of the branded content happen on a few platforms, and those platforms are generating huge amounts of return based on the consumption of that content. And this shift to decentralization is really a shift away from a kind of a central channel or a central feed or a central, screen in which those relationships play out, and towards a much more community focused, sort of on the ground focused relationships between people, because ultimately it's about people. It's about people helping each other and offering solutions to each other's problems, and doing so in ways that are meaningful for those very, very specific local challenges that people can find. Thinking about the issues to do with climate change and retrofitting traditional houses across the country and the world, there are going to be different needs for different types of approaches.
That's true.
That are really radically different. And who do you go to? How do you find that approach, and where are you listening for information? So that's part of the shift I think we'll see, and it likely will match some of the regulatory shifts in the past. The antitrust laws associated with control of markets and monopolies are just as applicable to the platform economy as they were to commodities and railroad and transportation and other past areas where that's happened.
So one of the things that you and I share as a sort of mission or a purpose in life is to equip creatives and creators as business owners. What are some of the opportunities you're seeing for creators to kind of take hold of owning their own business, owning the channels, developing and owning technologies, really moving into that driver's seat of the creator economy instead of kind of catching, whatever comes downstream that's thrown to them by tech companies or platforms. How can creators move upstream to start to really own the whole value chain and build an economy that's based on creative principles?
I think that's the most important question, and it's a very similar question that artists and designers have gone through in really situating themselves in the business landscape. And I think value chain is exactly the right word. Creators need to understand when their content is being monetized and by whom and for what ends. And something that I'm always caught on is that the creation of culture is not valued in the same way as the consumption of culture. So getting 100,000 likes for some post about something, it is much more valuable for the platform than for the person who has 100,000 likes and still can't buy a sandwich with 100,000 likes. It doesn't produce a real meaningful financial outcome. So helping them understand that, where they're situated within this large economy and within these mega players in that economy, and then to start to find very small levers and very small areas to pull away from that, to own the results of their content, own the access to their network. And we're seeing that with a lot of the new and emerging startups that are kind of challenging the existing platform economy, like Patreon, like Substack, like Medium, and it is really all about connecting that ownership of creation to the audience that's consuming that particular creation. And I think the creators that pursue that and try to wrap their arms around the whole system are going to be much better off than the ones that just struggle to compete for branded content deals.
Yeah.
It's never going to be sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the areas that we have seen is when creators and creatives step into a position of, I'm the CEO, I can hire the tech talent. But the creative strategic mindset is what's fundamentally making us a stronger, more scalable business. And that mind shift changes everything in a business. When creatives start to think about technology as a service to their business and something that they can build and hire, instead of being something that they are in service to. And that mind shift is empowering.
I so agree with that, and so strongly agree, because it's about not being not just foregoing control or ownership or agency because of a system that exists, but it's about really confronting and questioning that system and understanding it through that that assessment and confrontation, to really say, why is it that all of my content is on YouTube, and what is YouTube doing with that, and how is that generating results for YouTube that might not benefit me at all, and in fact might not benefit not just me, but the whole world of people that are participating in the content that I create. There's so many layers to this. I mean, just thinking about the power that is required, the raw energy that's required to run the platform economy, all of the servers, all of the resources, all of the electricity, that's overhead that content creators are paying for. And I don't necessarily think that that's a good idea in the long run, or that it will last for very long.
One of the key pieces too is the kinds of finance that are available for businesses. And this is a conversation that a lot of people have been undertaking. When you look at venture capital finance, in many ways, it's not suited to the vast, vast majority of businesses. And I think developing in the creative economy new forms of financing that allow for smaller scale businesses. Maybe it's a business that has 20,000 customers and has reasonable, market rate returns for investors. Those kinds of structures are really needed. And I would like to call on foundations and institutions that purport investing in the future of the arts and the creative economy, that they need to rethink how they're literally investing in the future and start seeding some of these alternative financing mechanisms, because otherwise we're stuck with the same, again, we're back to the same seeds, planting the same crop and expecting a different outcome, which we all know is not going to happen. I'm interested too. I want to go back. We started talking about LA Optimized, and that to me is a really interesting program that small and large governments across the country, cities, counties, states, could replicate. Tell us more about that to spark some thinking among leaders who might sort of say, oh, I see how our small businesses could really thrive if we connect them with creatives.
Well, absolutely. And just to touch on your previous point, Square, for example, is using the microtransactions that it has data on the Square platform to be able to come up with new ways of financing and providing money to businesses. And there's also a new credit card company for creators called Carrot, which is looking at network size, influence, and legacy of that, and coming up with new ways of providing credit. And these are just the very early stages in this, because the data is there and the behavioral data is being captured. So it's a matter of then retooling the financial instruments. With regards to LA Optimized, one of the underlying sort of values for the initiative is that small businesses are communities. Small businesses are the lifeblood of the cultures and the people they represent and serve. And so keeping that in one bucket, and then realizing that much of the activity, the commerce, the purchasing is happening in a way that's mediated by both platforms and by content-based storytelling, branded content. What is the difference between going to a local taco shop and going to Chipotle? Chipotle is producing tons and tons of actual raw content, and it makes it very difficult for a local restaurant to be able to even have a story to tell or a audience to be able to listen to. So we're trying to bring that together, to bring that content expertise, storytelling through the platform economy.
And if you guys almost have created a co-op isn't quite the right, but it's like a pool of money to support, right? So people can get a $500 sort of subsidy to pay for a creator to come and make that video and post it on Instagram or wherever, and kind of bridge those two worlds to the benefit of the community.
Right, and those that funding is coming in the form of micro grants, pro bono grants, to be able to incentivize those relationships between small businesses and the creative service provider. And it's really important that there is money on the table to pay for that, because there should be no expectation of free work or any kind of exploitation of either the small businesses or the creator, designer, artist community that is supporting and producing that work for those businesses. And then beyond that, it's absolutely essential that the relationships and that the knowledge is shared between those communities, because if you were to think about the size of the small business community relative to the growth potential of the creator economy, that is actually all of us. That is a huge amount of the population and where we exist and what we experience. So right sizing for that, rather than for shareholder value at a small number of large technology companies. Now, I'm not saying that those companies don't play a huge role in making these shifts, because I think they can also very much support and enable and bolster these kinds of relationships.
Yeah. Well, Robbie, as always, it's wonderful to talk with you. I love exploring all these ideas. Hopefully we'll be teaching a course together. We're kind of talking about how we might do an influencer to impact course for folks who want to move their influencer role more towards impact, exploring how to build a business around that idea. And I want to remind everybody, you have just a few days and there are just a couple of spaces left in Capital for Creators. You can apply. You can find it on our website. You can find it all over our social media. I appreciate, Robbie, that you brought up that creatives can't pay rent with exposure. We always like to point that out to people. If you are wondering more about the creator economy, you can reach Robbie or me. Robbie, you want to share your social handles?
I'm Robbie Nock on LinkedIn and Instagram, and on Twitter, though I never operate on Twitter, but it's still there.
It's too much to keep up with. Yeah. So find us on LinkedIn, visit us for more information, sign up for our Substack. We love staying in touch with people. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, Alice. Good to see you. Goodbye.
Bye.